Hey guys, and welcome to a showdown between two mighty competitors. On the left hand side we do have Logic. You can find him at Logic_EU as well on YouTube, up against Prophet Ren of Clan VM, Dowie versus Dark Elves. And this is going to be an old school Grudge match. And no, I'm not talking about Chariots up against Dwarfs, which is the current Grudge. It's an even more ancient one than that. Grombrindle, the White Dwarf, up against Malekith. So let's go through the Dowie forces first and have a little look at their build. So in the front line we have a ton of miners with blasting charges backed up by more miners with blasting charges. This is going to be absolutely hell for those Dark Elf foot troops to walk through. They're going to get exploded from all sides. Guarding the rest of this defensive formation, we have Longbeards on the flank. It looks like we have 2 units on either side, as well as a unit of Dwarf Warriors in the back lines. They're going to be protecting a double cannon. That's a pretty big responsibility for them. And in the central pocket, we have triple Rangers, who are themselves protected by Dragonback Slayers. We have a Runesmith as well. Looks like he has Rune of Negation, as well as Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin, or normal Rune of Wrath and Ruin, I should say, as well as the Hammer of Karak-Drazar, which is actually a really underused weapon. Really powerful hex that for 50 seconds you give someone minus 40 melee attack and minus 30% base weapon damage. Absolutely insane stuff there. And of course, as we said earlier, we do have the mighty Grombrindle, the White Dwarf himself, coming in with his ever-useful Flash Bomb. Grombrindle has no fear, and of course this beastie is unbreakable, a change I'm an absolute big fan of since the latest DLC. Flash Bomb should be pretty pivotal here because he's got quite a lot to protect with only that 1 unit of Slayers in the back. Now for the force of the Dark Elves, they are incredibly spread out. If you take a little look at the minimap, they're going for that full surround tactic. We have a couple of Harpies on the right hand side and a couple on the left, hidden in the trees. There's 2 units of Sisters of Slaughter. These bad to the bones ladies are incredibly disgusting up against the Dwarfs. They don't have much armor themselves, so you have to be really careful getting them in on the approach, but they have such good melee attack, poison. They'll certainly drag you down rather effectively. For the front line, we have a ton of Bleak Swords dotted all the way along. Cheap, cheerful, and not going to be very happy to be here once those miners do start unleashing hell upon them with those blasting charges. We have a Death Hag as well leading the ground forces. Backing up, we have a couple of units of Dark Shards with shields, it would seem. Looks like they're going to be able to trade rather effectively up against this Dwarven folk. And we have a Cold One Chariot, already triple bronze chevrons. See if we can gain any more chevrons throughout the battle. And of course, chariots in general have been always super powerful up against Dwarves, who really suffer when coming to deal with them. Well, there are a few tools like the Flash Bomb which do certainly help them. And oh no, Malekith is staring across the battlefield at his best ever friend, reincarnated by pure vengeance. He's coming by Soul Stealer as well as Gaze of Malice. The White Dwarf shall be screaming, "Let them come." There is still one dwarf from an ancient time who still draws breath, and the great cannons do sing his name. Launching shots downrange, actually aiming for Malekith, which is a good target on his big old dino limo. He's a little bit of a big hitbox all round, but the cannons unfortunately do miss those first few volleys. Second one coming in, third one coming in. Oh, so close, but not yet managing to get a successful hit. So the Dark Elf forces can be doing a nice slow approach, just whipping around the flanks with the Harpies, and they're going to be a nightmare to deal with. Slayers can't simply be everywhere in one go. The Rangers do now reveal themselves to the world and start raining fire down upon the front line as one cannon smacks that Death Hag directly in the face, doing some massive burst damage, and the miners of blasting charges do move up. We're going to have to get a lovely cinematic shot as the fire just explodes down the battle lines, and these Bleak Swords having a rather bleak day. And we can see half health, less than half health, less than half health, half health. Oh my god, the miners are just destroying this front line. But down swoop the Harpies into the back line, surrounding 1 unit of Rangers. We can see Dragonback Slayers have responded relatively quickly as well, with a Rune of Wrath and Ruin going down. This unit of Harpies is certainly doomed, but it is pulling the attention of the Slayers away from their cannons, and that's what the Harpies really want here. Flash Bomb going down by Grombrindle to slay the second unit, but in come the more and more Harpies just flocking in. Now going to be shutting down those cannons. Longbeards aren't going to have the damage output to really put these guys in the trash quick enough before that cannon does fall. Is there another unit of Harpies coming in? I thought there was 4. Maybe there's already 4 on the ground. 1, 2, 3, 4. There is indeed. Beautiful trap here though. So the Dragonback Slayers do get really bunched up on that unit of Harpies, which they need to do, and a big fat Gaze of Malice coming down, knocking them all down and doing some insane damage on them as well. Runesmith is getting and getting his hands dirty. Frontline for the forces of the Dark Elves is just broken wherever I look. There's just shattered units or units retreating or coming back with basically no health. Miners need to get way more aggressive though. Take this unit, push out, shut down the Dark Shards, otherwise they're going to be able to rain in fire whilst the Cold One Chariots do wreak havoc along the front lines there. That's all going to have a rather nice Soul Sealer coming down here in the big pocket, and it looks like, for the most part, these Sisters of Slaughter have managed to get into the front line relatively unharmed, and they will be living up to their name, slaughtering their way through miners and longbeards alike. One cannon is still firing, which is good play by Logic all round to keep this bad boy alive and active. Dwarf Warriors and Longbeards finally managed to finish off that other unit of Harpies, but Malekith is now reaving through the back line, and another unit of Harpies does once again get back up into the air before perhaps swooping down on this secondary unit of Rangers. Grombrindle trying his best, leading some of his forces in the back here to try and shove away Malekith. Now going to be able to drive him away. The hammer did come down on him, meaning he's basically going to do absolutely no damage, and he does indeed get caught. If the Dwarves are able to surround him here, he can be in big troubles, but it looks like good micro here by the Dark Elf player, realises his mistake and starts to move once more. Simply needs to hop over on these Rangers and hop back into this main engagement, keep it moving where possible and away from that Dowie Death Blob. You know, Rangers are being swarmed now by 2 Harpies, so that is certainly going to be the end of their tail. And Miners are actually struggling a little bit in the front line now. Yeah, they do huge burst damage across the board, but apart from that, their stats are pretty feeble and weak, and they're not going to be having a good time up against these rather vengeful Dark Elves now, who are coming back through the fire and the flames to slaughter the heavily armoured Dwarven folk, although Longbeards will fare much better. Dark Shards are completely unharassed at the moment, just raining fire from afar. Not too much the Dwarves can do about them at the moment, as another Gaze's Malice goes down, catching a ton of this Dwarven folk. Since the Slaughter have taken a considerable amount of damage at this point, unfortunately it looks like the back lines of the Dwarves got a little bit static, and a fat Soul Sealer has come down, catching all of these units. They do have that magic resistance, so it's not going to be the end of the world, and the cannon is unfortunately doesn't have enough troops left to man the artillery pieces. Rangers are falling back here, as well as some miners who are returned to the field. There is an 8 cannon crew here. They should be able to fire a cannon if they can make it back to our artillery piece in time. Rangers have finally managed to force off some of the Harpies. You can see those winged devils are falling from the skies in droves now as they retreat back to their homeland. And miners of blast and charges are once again going to be swooped up by... So far, the Harpy play has been really top-notch so far by the Dark Elf player. Now he's focusing on the weaker aspects of the Dowie build. It's a little bit like chess trying to take down the Dwarfs. You look at the opponent's formation, find their weakness, and you punish it. And that's certainly what the Dark Elves have done so far. But the White Dwarf cares not for your puny battle tactics. He has a big fat axe, and he is wielding it with fury here, slaughtering at these sisters with every single swing. They do go flying. Runesmith is taking inspiration as the Dwarven folk make a last stand here. Harpies do come in for a swooping charge in the rear, going to be breaking the leadership of the Dwarf Warriors as well as these Longbeards. Of course, the characters are made of far sterner stuff. Balance Power is currently going against Dwarfs, but they are the masters of the late game grind. And it looks like one cannon has managed to get back on top of its artillery piece, which is really good news. If this isn't spotted by the Dark Elves, they can reap some really bad havoc. All 3 chariots are alive. With very low health, you hit those guys with a cannon and it will start exploding models. Malekith does ride into the back, breaking some Rangers as well as some Longbeards and Miners, and the Dwarves have now kind of found themselves in little pockets of resistance rather than fighting as a unified force. Dark Shards want to move up as well and start focusing down the cannon crew. They will kill them very quickly, but both cannons are currently back online somehow, although this one, it's hard to tell if he's shooting at this one. It looks like he's shooting the back of the Longbeards instead, but the cannons do sing in the deep once more, although they're not tying down the chariots, which I think is a little bit of a mistake. Here in the centre, Grombrindle is having an absolute whale of a time with the ladies. Looks like they are pretty much done for at this point, both getting rather low on leadership. Runesmith is pretty much untouched, and Grombrindle is up to 42 kills, although the Harpies are starting to swoop back as well, looking to chase down these miners who have started to get real aggressive on the Dark Shards. Cannons are firing into them, but they've got pretty low ammunition at this point as well. And in the back lines, Harpies have now swooped down once more onto the cannons to finish them off for good this time, or at least the Dark Elf player hopes in his dreams. Gaze Malice going down on top of the Longbeards as he pulls back and allow him to escape. The hammer was popped on him once more, so he wasn't getting anywhere in actual melee. And he's going to be charging in to Grombrindle. I don't think he knows that he's got this kind of debuff on him. He's going to do 0 damage, and now he's been hit as well by a flash bomb, catching all of these units in Grombrindle's grasp. All the chariots going in toe-to-toe. But looks like some of the sisters have managed to dart in the way to protect Malekith, as he does desperately turn around and escape. Although the Runesmith gets in one little lick while he still can. A chariot explodes from the furious gaze of the White Dwarf. The wreckage is covered in blood, dead Cold Ones and Sisters of Slaughter. We are whipping him, but I'm sure Grombrindle, he might be into that kind of thing. Who knows? He doesn't seem to be losing too much health from it anyway. Miners being forced back here by Harpies. These guys are going to be going down, and the Dark Shards use up the last of their ammunition just to help pick them apart. They're going to have to move into combat, something they're certainly not very good at. Harpies, once again, finally getting finished off by Rangers, but every time I say this, they seem to come back with, like, no health, dart down, and help break another unit. And now they're actually swooping in. The Rangers, like, reload faster, reload, bring them down, bring them down. I don't know if it's going to work, though, and it does just in time. The Harpies manage to rout. The Rangers live to face another charge later in the day. The Cold One Chats unfortunately have rampaged at this point straight into Grombrindle, which certainly isn't something they want to be doing, as if he turns around, he will absolutely clobber them to death. Well, he takes a huge volley to the face there from the Dark Shards, which isn't good news whatsoever, but another chariot does fall to his mighty blade, the last one starting to rout and run for the hills. Grombrindle's desperately trying to get back here and shut down the Dark Shards, who have now used up the last of their ammunition, so he's going to be surrounded by foes which can't do too much work on him. Unfortunately for Logic and the Dowie folk, Runesmith is currently routing as well. He really wants to be fighting alongside the White Dwarf, but because of the good consistent pressure from these Harpies, there is a zero chance the Dark Elves is going to let him come back. Although, saying that, the Harpies may break here. Grombrindle's just presence is making them waver, which is absolutely hilarious. Maybe it will buy time for the Runesmith to rally. A big smoke flash bomb has gone down just to hold back these Dark Shards a little bit longer. Allow Grombrindle to cut them some ribbons a little bit quicker as well. Longbeard's desperately trying to rally. We've got Dwarfs all over the field coming back into the fray to try and prove to the White Dwarf that they are true noble Dwarfs and will not insult their ancestors by fleeing. But a Soul Stealer is going to be going down. Malekith once more charges in, and I'm sure he must have a little heart attack when he sees the White Dwarf for the first time in lore. I'm not sure if they've ever actually met, if he realises who the White Dwarf actually is. But the White Dwarf, yeah, not taking any crap right here. Completely surrounded by enemies, stabbing him from all angles. He only has eyes on the prize, and that prize, of course, is going to be Malekith. An overhanded cleaving strike coming down on those Cold Ones, who are currently doing all the work. Malekith is just kind of vibing at the back with his sword on his shoulder, letting his little pets here actually do the damage. Longbeards have been allowed to come back in here and surround the Dark Shards, and yes, there's only 26 of them, but those 26 are certainly going to help out the White Dwarf and be able to carve their way through many Dark Shards, of course, aren't used to hand-to-hand combat. Once again, Malekith does come in for the cycle charge, which is a good way to do this, but Grombrindle stands on his feet, being pushed back in the mud, but standing all the same, getting a couple more slaps in on Malekith, who's down to 944 health to the 995 of the Grombrindle. It's such an incredibly close duel from these two heroes. I think the battle is probably won from the Dark Elves. They've still got troops chasing off all the other Dwarven kind of assistants. But if the White Dwarf can beat Malekith, maybe there is hope, and it will be a big, big fat grudge lifted from the Great Book of Grudges. But in come the Harpies. They're actually going to be pretty good up against him. They have very decent attacks all round. Flapping around in his face is going to make it really hard for him to focus down at Malekith, who is swooping around, coming over bumpy ground, and charging once more in, actually pushing Grombrindle into a bit of a safer space away from the Harpies, and he's down to just 38 health, but with his last death blow, he slays Malekith before dying of pure joy. Very well played to these two champs. A very close game all round. Nothing but a couple of beat-up Dark Shards and Harpies left at the end of the day for Prophet Ren. But he did manage to seal victory and the fate of the ultimate grudge match of the White Dwarf and Malekith. Well played to both these guys. As I said at the start of the video, Logic is a YouTuber as well, relatively new to the multiplayer scene, but you can find him at logic_EU. He does host tournaments as well, so make sure to go check him out. And before as well we start breaking down all the stats, damage dealt, damage value, all that type of stuff, if you guys enjoyed this video, feel free to drop it a big old fat thumbs up and subscribe for more Total War Warhammer content. There's also links down below to my Discord where you can submit replays, get involved in the tournament scene, and see a load of pictures of ducks, because that does go on quite a lot in my Discord, as well as links to my Patreon to how you can support the channel. But anyway, the mighty Prophet Ren and Malekith, 16,000 damage dealt, 2,625 damage value. He is so disgustingly powerful in this matchup on his chariot. Definitely the best way to play him here. You could risk the dragon, because it's still going to crumple a lot of the dwarf infantry, and those big scary breath attacks will come in, but he's a far bigger target, much more likely to get shot, and a bigger investment all round. But really good micromanagement throughout the entire game from his fast-moving skirmishers by Prophet Ren. The one thing that really held him back was that frontline engagement he took up against the miners. You can see the Death Hag got absolutely zero value, one of the cannons just popping her in the dome straight away, and the Bleak Swords really suffered here, none of them making their value back, just getting obliterated from the miners, but they did take that damage so the rest of the build could prosper. Both units of Sister Slaughter did manage to get into combat, one getting 1,000 damage value, the other one only 731. They were stunted a little bit by having to take on the mighty White Dwarf himself. The Dark Shards, though, 2,144 damage value. Absolutely disgusting stuff, and 1.3 from this second unit. Really good work by them, certainly paid for themselves, and because of his attacking pressure, Logic had to defend so much, he couldn't really push out and take them on. Perhaps there was a kind of mid-game stage where the miners could have got a little more aggressive, but then they do open themselves up to being cycle charged to death by chariots. This chariot doing pretty good, not as good as some of the other units though. 884 damage value and nearly 10,000 damage dealt is pretty impressive nonetheless, and the Harpies were an absolute nuisance, just such a sticky, annoying unit for the Dwarfs to deal with, because they do a decent damage output as well. They're not like fell bats where it's going to flap around in your face and annoy you. They are going to be able to drag down models as well, and did a good number on those cannons. 898 damage value here, 500, 780, and 546. Pretty impressive work by them. Big kills across the board, and good, consistent, diligent play from Prophet Ren chasing those guys off the field. As for Logic's forces, it really did come down to could he stabilise his back line after it got initially assaulted, and he nearly did. Both cannons got online multiple times, this one getting 627 value, the other one 649, which certainly did pressure in the Dark Elves, but not quite doing enough for him there. The Rangers were kind of in an equal situation, where they got some decent damage value back for their cost, 400 here, 300, 440, and these guys are pretty dead cheap, but unfortunately they didn't do quite enough in the end. The Drownback Slayers, only 500 damage value themselves, mainly because of some really nice Gaze of Malice plays, just forcing over the Dwarfs. And that's one thing you've always got to keep in mind. Yes, Dwarfs do have that magic resistance. It does not mean that they are completely resistant, though, to all damage magic, particularly when they bunch up, and the Slayers, unfortunately, were punished for that. Longbeard's doing decent across the board, holding the line for a considerably long time, and the Miners of Blast and Chargers really were MVPs. Not the craziest damage value because of course, the troops they are attacking, but they just shredded that Dark Elf line, then allowed the heroes to try to carry the day. Runesmith coming in with some really nice buffs and debuffs, and the White Dwarf carrying the squad to a near victory, but at least he did his one wish to slay Malekith. 9,063, I should say, damage dealt, 115 kills, 2,318 damage value. A heroic day in the end, but a sad day for the Dwarfs. They fulfilled one of the oldest grudges in the book, but at the same time lost their mightiest warrior. Was it worth it? Only time will tell. Until next time, guys, peace, and as always, stay awesome.